Yes, yes. I'll be with you shortly, people. Just gonna fix myself a tasty beverage. Let me know how the microphone is sounding. You guys hear me okay? Yes, yes. What's happening, people? What's happening, live chat? All right, microphone on point. Be with you in just a second. Okay, let's get this show on the road. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I know for some of you it's really early in the morning. For some of us it's kind of nice time in the evening. Shout out to everybody. Big up Matt for the super chat. He said, "What's up, Hatman? Love your content. I was just watching the Kumo fight on the Mayweather card." Is that Kermel or Qmel? Excuse me, Kermel versus Lee Wood would be a sick fight. Not sure I've seen Kermel fight. Maybe I have. But shout out to Matt for the super chat. All right, Ardil says, "Hatman, would you and AJ be good mates? Based on the perception you have of him?" Probably not. Probably not. You know why? Because he reminds me of my brother. Yeah, he reminds me of my older brother, excuse me, not my oldest, my older brother. And me and him don't get along. So yeah, AJ reminds me of him, and yeah, we don't really gel, we don't really click. So what are you guys up to? What's happening? I'm guessing it's mostly late night UK crew. What's going on? Got insomnia? Coming in from the club? Working a graveyard shift? On the job? What's happening? Login DOS, big up. Big up. One guy says, "Hatman, what mic do you use? It sounds crisp." I'm using an SM7DB. So it's, you know, the kind of the standard streamer podcast mic that everybody uses these days. But this version has got a built-in preamp. I'm talking technical stuff now. This version has got a built-in preamp. Therefore, you don't need to have a cloud lifter or one of these other inline preamps in order to get decent gain out of it. I'm talking technical stuff here. You probably don't They're not interested in it. But yeah, a Shure SM7, what is it again? DB, SM7 DB. That's what it is. Big up Seamus. Thank you for the super chat. Rain Man said he woke up to relieve himself. All right. Adrian, what's good, bro? Long time no speak. What's happening, my guy? What's happening, my guy? All right, we got Boxing on the Edge in the chat. Make sure you guys subscribe to Boxing on the Edge. This guy's doing great work. His channel's really getting a lot of traction now, his boxing channel. And he's also got a music channel where he showcases his beats, his music production, his production techniques. Make sure you go check out. It's called Rap Cinematic. Yeah? I will take some credit on that name. Shout out to Henry over at Rap Cinematic. Go check out his music channel as well as his boxing channel. Cole says, are you ever going to come back to the UK? I have no plans to. Adrian says, all good, bro. Just living life, making music and trying to keep away from normies. I hear that. Yeah, all good here. Should we talk some boxing? There's a little bit of boxing news, not too much. There's a couple things to touch on and talk about. Ardil says, do you have a favorite footballer? I don't really watch football. The only sport I'm into is boxing. I watch a little bit of UFC. But I do have a footballer that I really respect, and that's Matt Letizia. Yeah, obviously he don't play anymore, old school. But I respect Matt Letizia. Big up, Matt. Yes, Fight Sport Talk. Big up. I hope you managed to resolve the issue you had, bro, with your channel. Yeah, ditto, DJ. Shout out to Stephen Dodd. Big up. Was your super chat? Oh, yeah, there it is. Sorry, I missed it. Shout out to Stephen Dodd for the super chat every time. Big up. Sorry I missed it first time around. You know, Matt Letizia, I do remember back in the 90s. He was one of those guys that were always featured on the goal of the month or goal of the week. You know, on Match of the Day and all those football programs back in the days. Matt Letizia was always scoring 25, 30-yard screamers. Him, Tony Yeboah, he was always doing it. Alan Shearer had a few. There's quite a few guys back in the days that had them 30-yard screamers. But Matt Letizia, he's got to be one of the all-time football legends for doing that. In terms of English players, for sure. He was a G. Ardil says, where did the name Hatman Strikes Back come from? I had an old channel. That channel kind of, fell by the wayside. So I struck back with this channel. There you go. Okay, this guy says, imagine Chisora actually fights Wilder. Yeah, that's something we could talk about, actually. Chisora against Wilder. No. In fact, I want to talk about... Let me show you on screen here. I want to talk about this man versus Wilder. Because Gareth A. Davis was interviewing, as you can see on screen here, he was interviewing Francis Ngannou. And he put it to him, would you like to fight Deontay Wilder still? And he said yes. He'd be very much up for the fight. Based on what he was saying in this interview, it seems like he's trying to go back to MMA for a little bit at least. PFL and what are they called now? PFL and Bellator are merged now, right? The Saudis bought him. So I think he's going to have a fight in that. But he's open to a Deontay Wilder fight. But what do you guys think about a potential Ngannou Wilder fight? There are some people who still want to see Deontay Wilder back in the ring. To me, he looks totally washed. But if he's going to get back in the ring, and it's going to be a fight that will generate some type of interest, you know, because nobody outside of Alabama really wants to see him fight a journeyman, right? So if he's going to fight someone that's somewhat of a name that maybe won't be too dangerous, we'll see. It might be Francis Ngannou, because Ngannou's been chinned in boxing now. So maybe that will give Wilder a bit of confidence to let his hands go against Francis, but Ngannou's got that big left hook. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Ngannou Wilder, do you think he should come back for the one last hurrah? Or is it too dangerous? Stretford Ender, yeah, I remember that. They got rid of Matt. Messed up, but maybe it was the best thing to ever happen to him. You know, it's not like he's short of money anyway, so. Stephen Dodd says, I wonder how Ngannou's punch resistance will be in his next MMA fight. That's a good question. That is a good question. You never know how a guy is going to react after his first knockout defeat, because the world can change for a fighter the first time he gets chinned. Because as far as I'm aware, Ngannou's never been chinned before. Was never chinned in MMA, was he? So now that it's happened to him, you just never know how a fighter's going to react to it. Sometimes they're just never the same again, because it was a bad knockout. Okay, this guy says Ngannou's next opponent is like 6'9". Ngannou was never really hurt in MMA. Now Cole says you'd think Ngannou's chin was solid with his head size. I think his chin probably is solid, but you know, at heavyweight, it's a different kettle of fish. There are very few people who can take the kind of shots Ngannou took and not be seriously hurt. Because AJ, the way he's punching at the moment, I know Eddie Hearn's talking about it and he's punching harder than ever. Promoters tend to be hyperbolic when they're talking about their fighters, but just looking at the mechanics of AJ's punching now, under Ben Davison, he's really twisting into the shots, he's leaning into the shots, and when a guy that size, who's that explosive, sorts his punch mechanics out, and he's really letting the shots go with full venom, there's very few people who are going to be able to take shots, especially when they're getting hit with those punches at the point where they don't see them. Because AJ was landing a lot of counters. Certainly the second knockdown was a counter over Ngannou's jab. And also, I don't want to make any excuses for Ngannou, but he talked about being very tired because the start time for the fight kept getting pushed back and it just messed him up. And if you're coming from MMA, maybe they don't have all that because it's all under one promotion. Whereas in boxing, there's all types of skullduggery that goes on behind the scenes. Yeah, if you're the rival, if you are the B-side, the away fighter, they're going to try all type of funny business with you. Yeah, especially if they perceive you as any type of threat, all sorts of funny business goes on. Because promoters are trying to protect their investment. I'm not saying that there necessarily was funny business for that fight, but it wouldn't surprise me. And Ngannou certainly was trying to suggest that there was funny business going on. So I'm not saying that without all that, he would have won the fight or anything. I always thought AJ would beat Ngannou comfortably, but it might have affected his punch resistance to some extent. You know, if you're really tired and whatever, late at night, and you just don't feel right in your body and in yourself, it might affect you. And these are the things that boxing experience gives you. Yeah. It's not just the experience of getting in the ring and having a fight with 10-ounce gloves on in a ring under Queensberry rules. It's also the experience of all the shenanigans and the funny business. You have to actually get hardened and used to all that stuff. You have to have a team around you to deal with all that nonsense. That's what comes with experience in boxing, is dealing with all that stuff as well. All right, let me talk about something here. So, Eddie Hearn said that he offered Stanionis the Jerome Boots Ennis fight. As you can see on screen here, right? Stanionis replied. This was a day or two ago. And Stanionis said, Cap, right? He's got a little blue cap there. Cap, I spoke with my advisor and nobody reached out to us. Stop that BS. I accepted the fight 2 years ago twice. Now, this was me. Somebody posted this in my Element group, right? And, you know, he was talking about Eddie came out saying that everyone rejected the offer to fight Boots, but all the champions are saying Eddie is lying. Could this be another AJ situation where everyone is trying to freeze Boots out? And I replied by saying, Eddie is a BSer, but I don't trust PBC to tell their fighters about all the offers they get. PBC are the most cultish promoters. Yeah, that was my reply. And shortly after, you know, I wrote that reply on in the Element group, then there's this exchange between Eddie Hearn and Stanionis. Yeah, Eddie Hearn replied and said, "You better check again." Obviously replying to Stanionis' previous tweet. "You better check again 2 days ago. Sent you the offer in." Stanionis then said, "My advisor doesn't deal with rubles. Make a real offer." This is why I didn't even hear about it. I swear down, PBC are like a cult. Yeah? And I had a funny feeling that they wouldn't have told Stanionis about the offer. And Stanionis is saying, oh, it was rubles. Yeah? So Eddie Hearn got into a next exchange here. There was some guy trying to say that he offered Stanionis 300K. And Eddie Hearn said, I wish you were so far out you wouldn't believe it. And then this individual, Dap, says, he was talking about you got to offer him at least $1 million. Eddie Hearn says it was a lot more. Now, I don't know whether Eddie Hearn was referring to the 300K or the 1 million. I'm not sure. Apparently he replied to Daps, who talked about the 1 million. But you don't know whether Eddie Hearn was really paying attention. Do you know what I mean? He's a busy guy. He's got lots of things to do, lots of people to reply to. So it's possible he was talking about the 300K. But if he offered Stanionis $1 million to fight Boots Ennis, I mean, is Stanionis making that kind of money for his fights normally? If he's not, he should have, ripped Eddie's hand off to get that 1 million. But PBC have got a long history of this type of BS. Yeah? Either not telling their fighters about offers that come in for them. Literally, it's like a cult. They try to cut their fighters off from the outside world. Keep them ignorant to the outside world. They have their own little PBC ecosystem, and you're not supposed to listen to anybody outside the ecosystem. They make them paranoid about other promoters, other networks. They fill their heads with all sorts of stuff. And at the end of the day, you can't really trust any promoter, not even PBC. So you should be using your own discernment and looking at all the offers out there. I mean, if I was a fighter and I was even thinking about signing to PBC, one contractual stipulation I would make is that if any offers are withheld from me and not sent straight to me, that's a violation of the terms of the contract. And I want some type of compensation for it, or I want out of the contract. You got to tell me. I don't know whether this is the case with the PBC fighters. Yeah? But if it was me, I'd be mad if Al Heyman or whoever, and I have to assume Stanionis is talking about Al Heyman because he referred to his advisor, right? So if my advisor is not telling me about offers coming in, that's a problem. But it seems like these PBC guys are so brainwashed. You know? Al Heyman, maybe he turned around and sweet talks them or something, you know? Gaslights them. Oh, it was chicken change that came in. You don't want me bothering you all the time with some BS offers, do you? I'm only going to actually, holler at you when it's a serious offer. That's why I'm taking, that's my job, to take all the nonsense off your plate and only come to you with serious stuff. Maybe that's how he's talking to them. Maybe that's how he's, pulling the wool over their eyes. But yeah, if Stanionis has been offered $1 million or anything like that or more to fight Boots Ennis, dear oh dear. I mean, you guys remember when Deontay Wilder turned down the DAZN deal. What was it? $100 million? Turned down $100 million. And the Anthony Joshua fight. Crazy. Madness. And that was, PBC getting in his ear. Acting like they got his best interests at heart when it's nothing of the sort. And they did something similar with Luis Ortiz, right? He would have had the biggest payday of his career. I think it was $7 million. Talked him out of it. PBC are weird. Like, seriously, aren't they weird? This weird cult thing going on. Now, I get it from a business perspective. I don't like it, but I get it. I just think the way the fighters are so easily bamboozled by Heyman and the PBC crowd is weird. As I say, it's like he's some type of cult leader and he's got them all gaslit, cut off from the outside world, paranoid about all the other promoters. The only people you can trust are people inside the PBC sphere. Yeah. Oh, okay. Big up Marley Marls. Long time no see. What's happening, bro? Yes. Old school. Foundation. Marley Marls. This guy says, Hatman, who would win out of Joseph Parker and Ajit Kabayel? That's a really interesting fight. It is a really interesting fight. I might go for Kabayel. Even though both guys are coming off good wins, and on paper, Parker's wins are better. And Parker is still a relatively young man. I think he's only about 32. But I'm going to go with Kabayel. He just looks a bit more business-like. Parker's been winning, but he's been winning, fiddling his way through fights. Whereas Kabayel's been taking it to people. And obviously styles make fights. I think Parker's still got quicker hands than Kabayel. But I don't know. I like Kabayel's spirit right now. And I think that might be enough. Kabayel can move himself. He's got pretty quick hands too. Not as quick as Parker's hands, but still pretty quick. I'd probably edge it to Kabayel at the moment. Boxing on the Edge says, hopefully Boots Ennis and Brian Norman get a deal done. Really good fight that. Yeah, I saw some talk about that online. Okay, Ardil says, Turkey's boxing league would be bad for boxing, in my humble opinion. He's also too emotional and it's getting in the way of business. Yeah, I mean, this is something I've been a little concerned about. which I've raised as a potential issue in some of my more recent videos, because the Saudi involvement in boxing was supposed to rid us of all the back and forth antics and, you know, people getting upset with each other and therefore not wanting to do business. Turki Al-Sheikh was supposed to be the antidote to all that, the solution to all that. But the way he was clapping at Canelo and the way he was talking about Tim Tszyu, you know, it's like he's becoming part of it. And that's why I wonder whether he's being influenced to behave like that by the likes of Oscar De La Hoya. Because he started going at Canelo not long after he announced he was doing that deal with De La Hoya, right? So maybe De La Hoya's got in his ear and, you know, because at the end of the day, he's a newcomer to boxing, Turki Al-Sheikh, you know, he's a newcomer. So maybe he's like getting influenced by some of these more established characters in boxing and thinking, okay, you can talk to fighters like that. Let me try it, you know? But I saw some type of retraction from him where he was backpedaling a little bit, saying, oh no, you know, I don't want to portray myself as a boxing legend or anything like that. I'm not a fighter. Yeah? I'm not sure if you guys saw that, but he was kind of backpedaling a little bit. So he's got enough sense to realize that the way he's been coming across is maybe a little off. So we'll see how things develop. Rayman says, is Parker's punch resistance gone since the Joyce fight? Because it appears every time Zhang touched Parker, he went down. Well, Zhang is a tremendous puncher, so I'm not surprised Parker went down. I mean, if you remember, Parker went down within the opening seconds of the first Chisora fight. You guys remember that? The opening seconds of the first Chisora fight, he was on the canvas. And obviously he got dropped by Dylan White. Was it twice in that fight? I think it was twice. So I don't know whether he has any, if there's any deterioration in punch resistance there. I just think he was in with a massive puncher in Zhang. And that's what happens when you get clipped. I mean, you saw the damage from the first left hand that Zhang hit Parker with. Busted his face up. Yeah, he was leaking. Snot box rocked. In fact, last time I said snot box rocked, somebody said that I must be watching Hassan Campbell. That wasn't a term, a saying invented by him. That's an old school New York American saying from way back in the days. I heard it in hip hop music back in the 90s. You hear people say, I'll rock your snot box. And obviously Hassan Campbell's from that era himself. So yeah, that's an old term. I knew about that long before Hassan Campbell. But he's kind of repopularized it, I guess, for a new generation. That term. He's a dramatic guy, Hassan Campbell. Entertainment. Okay, Sazad says, Hatman, how did that water fast come about? Was it worth doing? I'm considering. Yeah, it was definitely worthwhile. I mean, I lost a massive amount of weight in a very short space of time, which can't help but happen when you're consuming no calories and you're still burning calories. So, but all I will say to you is that what I did is went on a keto diet first before I did the water fast. So I was already in ketosis to a certain extent before I started the water fast. So I might have done a keto diet for about 2 or 3 weeks before I started the water fast. If you go from eating loads of carbs straight into a water fast, you might find that your body don't cope as well. But if you're already on a keto diet, it's a bit kinder to you. It's still a little rough the first few days, especially with the insomnia. That's the thing that got to me most. Couldn't sleep. I want to say on the second, third night, no sleep at all. But after that, the insomnia subsides. You can start sleeping and, you get into the groove. The hunger goes pretty quick. It did for me anyway. But again, I was already on a keto diet. So the hunger went quite quick. And yeah. Definitely had the results. So, and how did I get into it? I just thought about doing it anyway, I didn't even know it was called a water fast. I just thought, you know what, let me just not eat food. Because as you get older, your metabolism slows. It becomes much more difficult to shed the weight. And I was like, you know what, let me just not eat anything. And people were saying, okay, that's called a water fast and this, that, and the other. Okay, this guy says, is Adam Azim and Hamza Shiraz all hype? Us Asians are not really known to be great sporting stars. It's all the culture's killing us. I think Hamza Shiraz has a good shot at least picking up a world title at middleweight. At least picking up one world title at middleweight. I think he's got a good shot. I've been watching Hamza Shiraz quite closely and he's been developing. He's been doing well. And he's got a steely look about him. If you look at his eyes and the way he shapes up in the ring, how poised he is, I think the time he spent in those American gyms has really paid dividends for him. I think it's really helped him. It's really hardened him, actually. Because in some of the UK gyms, the atmosphere and even the sparring to some extent can be a little polite depending on which gym you go to. Whereas in America, the gyms are generally a lot tougher. And if you're a Brit, if they find out you're a Brit, then they really want to smash you to bits, in the ring sparring because they think you're soft. They think you're sweet. So Hamza Shiraz would have been through all that and he's stuck with it. He's gained the respect of the American fighters in the gyms he spars in and trains in the States now. So I think that's really helped him. So I think he can do something at middleweight, Hamza Shiraz. As far as Adam Azim, yeah, I'm not too sure about him. To me, he looks very green, very wet behind the ears. Not so much, although a little bit, his technique, more so emotionally and mentally. He just comes across like naive and a bit wet behind the ears. So I'm not sure if he's hardened enough for the top guys, I'm not sure if he ever will be. Shout out to Devin in the chat. Okay, DB Genius says, who wins, Hearns or McClellan at 160? I want to say Gerald McClellan wins that fight. If Hearns were to win the fight, I think he'd outbox McClellan and win on points because Hearns was the better boxer of the two. But McClellan was a great puncher himself, naturally heavier than Hearns, and he had an absolutely rock-solid chin. And that was the thing about Tommy Hearns. Even though he was a fantastic fighter, incredible speed, power, he had every skill in the book, his chin let him down several times in his career. And against someone like Gerald McClellan, surely McClellan will catch him at some point. Now, there's a famous sparring story which Manny Stewart told about when McClellan and Tommy Hearns, were sparring in the gym, and Tommy Hearns was getting the better of it. McClellan at the time, I think, was only about 17 or 18. He was a young kid. And Tommy Hearns was getting the better of it, and he was like trash talking McClellan in the spar. If you look it up, go on a search engine, look up the interview, you'll find it pretty easy. But anyway, Tommy Hearns was like whispering in his ear, taunting him in the spar, really winding him up. And McClellan was a hothead. So after the spar, they're taking their gloves off and all that type of stuff. And McClellan went over to Tommy Hearns and he was angry. He started getting, very agitated, and Tommy Hearns was thinking, okay, this kid's going to hit me. I can't remember if Manny Stewart said McClellan swung for Hearns, but it got very, very heated. And at this point, Tommy Hearns, I think he said he had his right glove off, so he just had a wrap on. And he cracked McClellan with an almighty right hand, bang on the chin. Now look, McClellan was only like 17. Couldn't have hit him any harder, according to Manny Stewart. And he said McClellan just stood there, stone face, no reaction, not hurt at all. And he said it was not only a shock to him, but a shock to Tommy Hearns as well. Obviously, people jumped in, they split it up. But he said at that point, he realized that McClellan had an iron jaw. I mean, this guy had a mega chin. And you saw it in the Nigel Benn fight. Obviously, that was tragic ending and what have you, but McClellan didn't go down in that fight until his brain was bleeding. Yeah, that's how tough his chin was. He didn't go down until he was seriously injured. And he voluntarily went down. It's not like he was knocked down. He took a knee against Nigel Benn. So he had a tremendous chin. And I got to figure against Hearns, he'd get through at some point. Maybe late in the fight, take him out. Then again, maybe Tommy Hearns just boxes his head off for the whole fight and wins on points. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Late night. Or early morning, depending on where you are. Just having a read of some of these comments here. Little catch up. Okay, Pennant says, Hatman, I always wanted to see Dylan White versus Jarrell Miller. Yeah, a lot of people always wanted to see that fight. I think people wanted to see it more so because of the characters, the clash of characters, because they're both like really alpha. But stylistically, personally, I was never really that keen on the fight. I always thought that Jarrell Miller would probably win if he was in shape. I thought he would probably just, do something similar to Dylan White as we saw him do to Andy Ruiz. Just sit on him. Do you know what I mean? That's basically what Miller does. He sits on you. 300-pound man sitting on you. Pause. All right, Isaac says, do you think Hrgovic is retired? Well, he's been conspicuously quiet since that loss to Daniel Dubois, but I've got no reason to believe he's retired. It was definitely a reality check for him, though. All right, Matthew says both Hrgovic and Anderson are underrated at this point. Both should have won their fights. Lost because of strategic mistakes. I don't know whether I can agree with you as far as Anderson. He made strategic mistakes, yes, but I'm not sure if he got his strategy right, whether that would have been enough to beat Bacoli. I'm not sure. With Hrgovic, I tend to concur with you. I think Hrgovic could have won that fight, but he was hell-bent on blasting Daniel Dubois out in the first round, or the first couple rounds. He literally emptied the tank, thinking Dubois would just fold, and he didn't, and it backfired on him. Obviously, the cut didn't help, but your gas tank being empty doesn't help either. So, yeah, I think Hrgovic, if he'd approached the fight in a more sensible fashion, he could have won. Because if you go back and watch that fight, even after the first couple rounds, Hrgovic was still landing plenty. He was getting hit back, yes. And the cut and the fact he was tired made things seem a lot more dramatic against him than they actually were at times. Obviously, by the 7th round, he was getting, he was shipping a lot of punishment. But in some of the mid rounds in the fight, he was still doing decent work. Not as much as the first couple rounds, but he was still doing decent work. And I watched The Wire's post-fight video, and he got a lot of flack for that video. But I kind of agree with him when he said that he would have had Hrgovic ahead going into that final round of the fight. What was the fight? Was it the 8th or the 9th round? The fight got called off because of the cut. I could see how Hrgovic would be ahead, to be honest. If you go back and watch that fight and see who's landing what, I'm not saying definitively Hrgovic should have been ahead, but you could see it. So, again, if he was a bit more sensible, he might have been able to win that fight. And, 2 things happened. Firstly, he punched himself out, basically. And secondly, he showed Dubois his hand. He showed Dubois everything he had, so there was nothing more for Dubois to fear. In boxing, a lot of it is psychological. When you're throwing feints and when you're doing this, that, and the other. The fear of the unknown is a big thing in boxing. Your opponent doesn't know whether he can take 3, 4, 5, 6 of your right hands. You hit him with 1 or 2 and he's like, okay, let me not get hit with too many more of those. If you spam the right hand and hit him with like 5, 6, 7 and he's okay and he's not hurt, now you got a problem. Because he thinks, okay, I can take these shots and there's no way he can keep throwing them at this frequency. So it gave Dubois a lot of confidence, funny enough, taking all those shots. All right, Nick says Dubois is the most improved fighter of the past year. Definitely one of them, for sure. I'll go along with that. Yeah. One of the most improved fighters, for sure. Matt G says, Hatman, do you think Anderson's actions in the ring were him following Sugar Hill's game plan, or did he go rogue and try to trade? Also, do you think Sugar Hill and Jared is a good match? Well, Sugar Hill really didn't have enough time with Jared Anderson to really do much with him. He only had a few weeks. You need a few fights with a guy to see if you gel, to see if you can really help him. I don't know. He needs to, I would say, stick with Sugar Hill for a fight or 2 more, see how things go, because Jared Anderson has got a lot of bad habits. The lean back he does, that needs to go completely. He's in a heavyweight division where 6'4", because he's 6'4", is like a medium height these days. That's not tall for a heavyweight now. A lot of the top guys are 6'6 plus. Obviously not Usyk. AJ, obviously Fury, Martin Bacoli. I guess Daniel Dubois is about 6'4.5", 6'5". But yeah, the lean back is a move that Vitaly Klitschko used to use, but Vitaly was so much taller than his opponents. nobody could step in when he was leaning back and punish him for it. Also, Vitali didn't hold his feet all the time when he was leaning back. Similar to Muhammad Ali, he'd do the lean back, but he'd move his feet out of the way as well. Whereas Jared Anderson plants his feet more often than not when he does that lean back. And if a taller guy with longer arms than you is coming at you when you're leaning back like that, he can't miss you with a straight right hand. Or even the long left hook of Bakole. And also, on the inside against Bakole, when he was leaning over his front foot, he was getting caught with the uppercuts. Bakole set him up for that. So, there's a lot of technical issues to work on. Maybe Sugar Hill can help him, because Sugar Hill is kind of a conventional trainer. And Jared Anderson does a lot of unconventional things. So I'm not saying all of the unconventional things that he does need to go, but the lean back needs to go. And he obviously needs to take his lack of punch resistance into account moving forward. Yeah. Maybe he thought he had a great chin. I mean, I remember after the Charles Martin fight, when people were asking him about getting hurt, he was in total denial about it. I didn't get hurt. What are you talking about? We all saw him get hurt. Remember the big left hand that Charles Martin, I mean, he landed that big left hand several times. One time in the middle of the fight where Anderson was clearly hurt, and then in the final round, Anderson was hurt even more badly. Legs went. And yet after the fight, he's in complete denial about being hurt. Obviously, he can't be in denial after what happened to him against Bakole. So, yeah, he's going to need to adapt his style, adapt his technique accordingly in order to compensate for not having the greatest chin in the world. I'm not saying he's got the worst chin I've ever seen, because, you know, you look at the guys Bakole has beaten, the guys he's hit. I mean, I remember when he fought that Hulk guy. Remember that guy he fought? I think it was on the undercard of, what fight was it in Poland? Was it Babic versus Rosansky? It might have been in the undercard of Babic Rosansky. And that big Hulk, they called him, he was getting pinged around all over the place by Bakole. He was dropped heavily on several occasions by Bakole. He was a big old lump. I've seen him subsequent to that fight, and no one's, at least not from what I've seen, done the same to him. So, you know, Bakole's very heavy-handed. I'm not saying Anderson's got the worst chin I've ever seen, but he's going to need to be a lot more defensively responsible, moving forward. Shout out to the Real Heel. Matthew says, is his chin that bad? Well, as I just was saying, I don't think his chin is that bad. You know, Lennox Lewis's chin, you know, you mentioned Lennox Lewis's chin there. Lennox Lewis got hit. Both times he got knocked out, it was by almighty punches. I mean, Hasim Ratman in particular, he never landed a right hand as good as that before or after at any point in his career. I saw Hasim Ratman's whole career. He never landed a right hand like that on anyone else ever. So that was like the perfect shot for him. That was like the shot of a career, the shot of a lifetime. And Oliver McCall, he landed a lot of good shots on people over the years, but the shot he hit Lennox Lewis with was one of the better ones. It was one of the better ones. But then you look at other Lennox Lewis fights, when he fought Ray Mercer, for example, Ray Mercer could punch, and Lewis took all his best shots, never went down. When he fought Vitaly Klitschko, took all Klitschko's best shots, never went down. So, I don't know, with Lewis it was a bit more of an enigma. His chin was a bit more of an enigma than Anderson. Yeah, Anderson was hurt several times against Charles Martin, was knocked all over the place, down several times against Bacoli. I would say Lewis had a better chin than Jared Anderson, from what I've seen. But the thing about Anderson, which will help him as far as punch resistance, is that he's very physically fit. He's got tremendous stamina, tremendous work rate, Anderson. That's one of the things you'll notice about the fight, is even though he was taking a beating, it was actually Bacoli who looked like he was breathing a bit harder in some of the rounds. Anderson was good as far as his gas tank. His chin and his defense just didn't hold up. Igor, yes, that's the guy. Igor Shevadutsky. That's the one. Yes. Thank you. Big up 24. Do me a favor, peeps, and hit the like button. It's free. Hit the like button, folks. Shout out to everyone on a late night. Whether you're on the graveyard shift, whether you got insomnia, you're coming in from the club, or you're in a different time zone. E. Daniel says, Usyk versus Lennox Lewis, Usyk wins. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you, but Lennox Lewis never fought a southpaw as a pro. So it's really hard to gauge. And he didn't fight that many movers either as a pro. He fought a mover very early on in his career called Melvin Epps. I think it was Melvin Epps. But, you know, he was no great shakes. And then other than Melvin Epps, he fought Tyrell Biggs, who was a mover, but, you know, Tyrell Biggs was washed at that point. Lewis stopped him in, 3 or 4 rounds? In fact, Tyrell Biggs was probably washed by the time he fought Mike Tyson. But he was even more washed. And I say that because he had a crack habit. That's why the Duvers fed him to Mike Tyson so early on in his career. I know he was an Olympic gold medalist and all that, but he took that Olympic gold medal and he started freebasing. He got lost in freebase. It's incredible. The 80s was a crazy time. You know how many of those guys in the mid 80s were shooting up? You know what I mean? They were shooting up and hitting the pipe and stuff like that. Loads of them. Snorting like Scarface. Loads of them were doing that. Top fighters. So yeah, Tyrell Biggs was a mover. Did Lewis really fight any other movers? Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Not really. I mean, Henry Akinwande was somewhat of a spoiler, more so than a mover. He got disqualified. Holyfield could move, but he didn't really try to move against Lennox Lewis. That wasn't the game plan. He tried to fight him. So, I don't know. I'm not going to argue with anyone who thinks that Usyk would beat Lennox Lewis. I don't know. You know, we don't have a time machine to find out for sure, but it's not a ridiculous thing to say. Yeah, it was crazy, Rayman. People saying that Usyk wasn't going to be able to land on Fury. Crazy. Usyk was the one landing big shots first, earliest in the fight. The first big shot of the fight was the big left hand from Usyk at the end of the round. At least as far as headshots. Yeah. Fury landed a hard shot to Usyk's chest a few seconds before he got caught with the big left hand from Usyk. But in terms of headshots, the first big headshot was landed by Usyk in the first round. And then he landed big shots at the start of the second round. more big shots throughout the second round. Yeah, people were just getting far too carried away with this notion that Tyson Fury was some type of heavyweight Mayweather. How could he be a heavyweight Mayweather when he'd been down 7 times? Don't even make sense. And as you say, Chisora was able to land something on him. Yeah, 1-1 said the left-hand Fury felt it. For sure, you could see it. His eyes did a little flip when he got caught with that shot. Steve Bunce actually pointed that out very early on in the fight. He said that Tyson is showing when he doesn't like a shot. That's the way he described it. He's showing it on his face. He's unable to maintain a poker face when a shot disturbs him, when a shot bothers him. He's showing when he doesn't like the shot. He would kind of grimace and like rub his nose when he get hit with a shot that bothered him. And of course that spurred Usyk on. Hatman, Jared Anderson versus Derek Chisora next will be a good comeback for him. I don't think Chisora's really interested in those kind of fights. Personally, I could be wrong, but I think Derek Chisora will be looking for a bigger money fight than that. Maybe a Wilder. A Zhang if he can get it, but they're looking at Zhang Bakoli apparently, the Saudis. So I think Chisora will be looking at that kind of fight. Dylan White, obviously. That's probably the most natural fight for Chisora if Dylan White can get his license, you know? Because Derek Chisora is in the driving seat now. Dylan White is in no position to make any demands about where the fight should be. Because maybe Dylan White could have the fight with Chisora in wherever. Zimbabwe, right? Chisora wants his final fight to be in Zimbabwe. Maybe, Dylan White could get the fight over there. Because Zimbabwe, I think, do have a boxing commission. It's not like Saudi where they're dealing with the British Boxing Board of Control. No, Zimbabwe got their own boxing commission out there. I'm sure they would license Dylan White. But that's for Derek Chisora's final fight of his career. He says he wants it to be in Zimbabwe. But the penultimate fight of his career, which is the next one, if he sticks to his word, that is, he says he wants that to be in Manchester. Okay, somebody says Chisora versus Bakoli in Africa is his last fight. I'm not sure he'd want his last fight to be against Bakoli getting smashed to bits in his home country, you know? Then again, he's a crazy guy. You never know. But I would have thought he'd want something more winnable for his last fight. Something a bit easier. A bit less rough. And shout out to 1-1. I appreciate it. How about a Jagba versus Chisora? I don't think there's the money there for Chisora. I think he wants money, you know? I don't think a Jagba brings that kind of money. Chisora Takam 2, that's actually a decent suggestion. That could be possible for Zimbabwe, maybe. Because they've got history. The first fight was incredible. But would Chisora want to give Takam a second go? Because that was a hellish fight for Derek Chisora. He was taking one of the worst beatings of his career in that fight. Prior to landing the knockout punch. or the knockdown punch firstly, and then Takam got up and he finished him. Rainman says Chisora is a throwback. He absolutely is a throwback in every sense of the word. The Grand says, the way Fury was hurt by Usyk was how I expected Klitschko to hurt Fury all those years ago, but Fury was fresher and Klitschko couldn't maintain punches. Klitschko just couldn't land, his hard shots. He was hesitant. He wasn't committing to the punches. He never really hit Fury with anything like his hardest shots. Whereas Usyk is a much braver fighter than Klitschko. This was one of the things I said before the fight, because there were some people saying, well, Usyk and Klitschko, both Ukrainian, and therefore they might have a similar mentality. And I was like, no. Usyk's mentality is totally different to Vladimir Klitschko. Completely different. Totally different type of psychology. You see, Klitschko, Vladimir that is, had typical... The typical psychology that you would expect from someone who really hasn't had to fight for respect in boxing. And what I mean by that is Vladimir Klitschko was so big, so strong, so powerful, and so talented that he was having his way in the gyms from when he was young, in sparring, in the amateur system. He was just so good compared to the people he was in the ring with, and he had such physical advantages over them that nobody really ever got to him to test his heart. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Usyk was a little guy the whole time. He was having to scrap it out with people he didn't have massive physical advantages over. And it was rough for him in his early days in the amateurs. And then he moved up and he got better and better and better. But he was still fighting bigger punchers, rough guys. Again, he didn't have this massive size advantage. So his journey was totally different. He had to become so much tougher mentally in order to have success than Vladimir Klitschko did. So by the time he fought, but by the time he stepped up to heavyweight, I knew he'd be fine mentally, because he's been fighting big guys in the WSB, sparring big guys for years. Whereas with Klitschko, he was the typical on-top fighter. Yeah, Vladimir Klitschko. I mean, he admitted in an interview years ago that his brother, Vitaly, was a natural fighter. Whereas he had to learn how to be a fighter psychologically. It didn't come naturally to him. So yeah, whether or not Usyk was a natural fighter, I don't know. Maybe he is, but either way, his mentality was forged in the fires. He came up the hard way in boxing. And so when he went in there against the big guys, Joshua, Dubois, Fury, he took it to him. Especially he took it to Fury more than he took it to the other two. When he said, I will not leave you alone, he weren't joking. Took it to him. And that's what Usyk does. He keeps the pressure on you. He wears you down mentally. He gets you more tired. Tony Bellew said it before the fight. He's never been so tired in his life than he was in that Usyk fight. He just constantly keeps you under pressure mentally, keeps you thinking. He's got so much going on with head movement, foot movement, punches coming at you, setting traps, punishing your mistakes. The concentration level you have to have against Usyk is so intense that it drains you, especially for heavyweights. Because heavyweights are used to fighting at a slower pace, having a little clinch, pushing the guy back, doing a bit of messing around. Fury's been doing that for years. Old man in his way through the rounds and what have you. Against Usyk, he couldn't do that. He wasn't allowed to do that. And that's why Fury's gas tank went. And once his gas tank went, I mean, he did get his second win, right? But once his gas tank went around the 7th, he was getting hit more cleanly, even more cleanly than he was earlier on. And at that point, he was weakened because he was tired. So that's why Usyk was able to hurt him far worse. Well, Klitschko didn't hurt him at all. But that's why he was able to get to him like that and have him in that kind of trouble. Even though Klitschko was a much bigger puncher than Usyk, way bigger puncher. But he just didn't land the punches necessary to do anything with Fury. Where's everybody from in the chat? Where you guys from? What country? Put your country in the chat. Let me see where people are tuning in from. UK, US, New Zealand, Australia, Germany. Okay, we got Florida in the house. Great Yarmouth, UK. Nigeria. What part of Niger? Which state? Australia. Okay. Philly in the house. Trinidad and Tobago. Okay. US. Salford, UK. All right. Northwest in the house. Canada. Shetland Islands. Wow, all the way out there. All right. California, Ireland, Liverpool. London, New Hampshire, US. Texas, okay. Shout out to Texas. Whereabouts in Texas are you? Shola in London via Thailand. So are you from London but in Thailand? Is that what it is? Pretoria, South Africa, okay. How's the load shedding over there in South Africa right now? Still a problem? Someone I know is about to go South Africa next month for a couple of weddings. I think they're going to Cape Town and Joburg. I know that load shedding was an issue over there. Abuja. Okay. Nigerians always tell me that Abuja is the nicest city in Niger. Austin, Texas. Shout out to Matthew over there in Austin. Guzi says Cape Town's rough. Yeah, Cape Town's crazy rough. Cape Town is crazy rough. I mean, South Africa in general is just crazy rough. Got to stay in the safe spots. They got good security. This is very, very rough there. They literally have, in South Africa, like at least 100 political assassinations every year. It's crazy there. Very rough. But beautiful as well. You know, it's a big country. Stay away from the danger zones. All right, we got Pennsylvania, Soundstream. Shout out to you. Over there in Pennsylvania. Now, Alex says, do you still box? Not competitively, no. I'm too old, but I still do a bit of training. You know, that's just the habit, the lifestyle. All right, we got Loughborough. So there's quite a few Americans in the chat. Shout out to you guys over in the US. But I want to say there's mostly Brits in there by the looks of it. Guzi says, need to live in a gated community with armed guards in Cape Town. That's a fact. But glad to hear the load shedding is not as much of an issue. Subsided now after the election. But soon it will be back. Okay. So does the load shedding have something to do with the election? Is that what it is? Funny games that they're playing, or what is it? E. Daniel says, I just got Cleto Reyes gloves and they are overrated. Yeah, I've never liked Cleto Reyes gloves. I've always found them to be uncomfortable, but some people love them. So to each his own, right? They're very well made in terms of the build quality. Cleto Reyes use fantastic leather. The stitching is always on point. They'll last you for years and years and years. But I just don't like the ergonomics. Don't like the ergonomics of them. All right, how do I zoom this here? Is this gonna work? Okay, this works. Fernie G says, Madrimov trains about 4 miles from my house. Yeah, Madrimov did well against Terence Crawford. If he'd stepped on it a bit, you never know, but he did well and his stock rose. I'm kind of interested in this whole idea that Crawford isn't going to fight again unless he gets the Canelo fight. He's not interested in anything else other than Canelo. That's a bit of an eyebrow raiser for me. I mean, he is getting on. What is he, 36, 37? Yeah, DB Genius. Can't argue with that. I actually had Madrimov winning by, I think it was a round, a point or two. Could have gone, it was a very close fight. There were so many swing rounds. I got no issue with anyone who gave it to Crawford, but on my scorecard, I think I had Madrimov winning by a round or two. Colby Wan says, what happened to Spence? Spence was kind of checking out of boxing mentally a few years ago. That's what led up to the crash, right? So after coming back from the crash, he had a couple of fights. Who was it? Danny Garcia and Ugas. And then he went into the Terence Crawford fight. Took a horrendous, hellacious beating. And that basically knocked all the fight out of him, it seems. There's rumors that he's going to come back and fight Fundora. Maybe they're offering him a decent amount of money. But I don't think Spence's heart is really in it at this stage. Troll Beta says, does Spence have brain damage? I don't know, he might. I mean, the residual effects of that car crash are probably there. And a lot of people were speculating about that. I was speculating about that because I found it incredible that Spence was able to come back and do the job on Ugas that he did. But there were little warning signs even in that fight when he took a few shots back that all was not well with Errol Spence. So he can still dish out the punishment. But when he starts getting hit, that's when the residual effects of the accident start manifesting. And people obviously remarked about how badly his face swole up in the Terence Crawford fight. Obviously he was getting hit a lot, but you wonder if he would have swole up so bad had that accident not happened. I suspect not. I suspect not. 1 second. Just going to make an adjustment here. All right, Jay Aston says, how many fights do you think AJ has in him? It's a good question. I think with AJ, you really have to take it fight by fight. Because AJ has become bitter towards the boxing game. Not just the fans and the politics and all that type of stuff, but, you know, the boxing in the ring. He's become bitter about it. You can see that in him. You could see that from obviously his reaction after the Usyk rematch. And so every win is sweet. So as long as AJ keeps winning and the wins are relatively comfortable, I think he'll keep going. I don't think AJ is going to pack it in if he's on a roll of good victories, dominating victories. I think that will just encourage him to keep going and going and going, because to me, physically, he looks the freshest out of all of that generation of fighters. He looks fresher than Fury, definitely fresher than Wilder, maybe even fresher than Usyk's still fresh because he's a pure athlete, but he's 37 going on 38. AJ's 34, he's got a few years on him, a few years younger. So I think AJ's still physically fresh. It's whether his heart is going to be in boxing, and that all depends on whether these victories keep coming and whether the victories are easy enough. If he just, blasts Daniel Dubois out in a couple of rounds and then goes on and fights somebody else and deals with them, I think he'll keep going for maybe several more years. I think it's going to take a real tough fight or another loss to make AJ actually retire anytime soon. Let's say within the next 2 years. Yeah, AJ doesn't come across, at least not in the public eye, as being as happy as he used to be, because he's kind of a bit bitter now. All right, peeps, I'm going to turn this in. Shout out to everybody for joining me here on this live impromptu. I know it was very late for a lot of you, but I'm a random guy. So shout out to everybody for tuning in. Fight Sport Talk. Philip Answer, Soundstream, and everybody else. Goozy, Matt G. Catch you guys in the next one.